I am essentially a static, contemplative and objective person, almost a hermit in daily life, and always preferring to observe rather than participate. My only natural and genuine form of imagination is that of passive witnessing. The idea of being that sort of disembodied, floating eye which sees all manner of marvelous phenomena without being greatly affected by them. I should describe my known nature as tripartite. My interests consisting of three parallel and disassociated groups. A, love of the strange and the fantastic. B, love of the abstract truth and of scientific logic. C, love of the ancient and the permanent. Sundry combinations of these three strains will probably account for my odd tastes and eccentricities. I could never write about ordinary people, because I'm not in the least interested in them. And without interest, there can be no art. Man's relation to man does not captivate my fancy. It is man's relation to the cosmos, to the unknown, which alone arouses in me the spark of creative imagination.
You are listening to TMBDOS. They must be destroyed on sight. The following podcast may contain adult language, conversations surrounding adult situations that may not be suitable for younger listeners, as well as spoilers for the films discussed on this podcast. You have been warned. Now, come on in.
They must be destroyed on sight.
Okay, we're back, and it is episode 104 of They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, and I am your host, Lee, trysting with bubble-headed co-ed, Russell. And I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel. Who's going to believe a talking head Harper? How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. My dog is chewing on some kibble in the background. I hope no one minds. But yeah, I'm here. Watched some Lovecraft movies today, and we're gonna talk about them.
Eldritch horror, yes.
Eldritch horror of late '90s production value is on the menu today.
Yeah, we're going to be finishing off our first sort of look at Lovecraft adaptations here. Hopefully Paul will join in. He's not here right now, but he might join in at some point. He knew this was going to happen tonight, so Paul, where the fuck are you, dude? But we are going to be looking at Re-Animator from 1985, and we're going to be looking at two short films sort of surrounding Lovecraft and his writings and his mythos. But before that, we'll just get into a little bit of house cleaning here, and I just want to mention two things right off real quick. If you have not listened yet, our good friend Lee Van Teef, the Wolfman, appeared on the latest episode of Blood on the Tracks, our soundtracks and scores sort of sub-podcast for They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. And, of course, predictably, he covered werewolf movies. So if you haven't listened to that yet, please download that and take a listen. Lee Van Teef is very expensive, so I want to get the most out of the money I paid for this motherfucker. And, please exploit Lee Van Teef and listen to him and listen to some really cool werewolf film soundtracks and scores. And he'll be back next for our Halloween episode, his annual Halloween radio episode. Also, my latest appearance as co-host of City of the Dead with our good friend James Murphy from the Pex Lives podcast. We covered Asylum from 1972. We're continuing our look at Amicus films. We're going to be doing Tales from the Crypt next, the original Tales from the Crypt, not the bullshit movies from the 90s. And goddamn, all modesty aside, I think it's our best episode yet of City of the Dead together. And it was a lot of fun to do. and you guys should check it out. All these links will be in the show notes, by the way, so there you go. Moving on, Daniel, sir, is there anything you've watched lately you want to talk about, or?
No, I haven't really watched anything really worth talking about in detail. I will say, as long as we're hyping our appearances on other podcasts, other better podcasts, ultimately.
Yeah.
You know?
Let's be real about it, yeah.
I did do a Wrong with Authority bonus episode about two Romero films, which you and I have not covered, but we've talked about on this podcast. And I think, I don't know, maybe one day you and I will cover them as well. But my buddy Kip Hauer and I decided to, who has been on this podcast as well, we decided to do the Crazies and Martin. It's kind of our memories of George Romero. We did record that right after George Romero died, and then I just couldn't get off my ass and edit that for a while. So, but yeah, that's up now, and you can check that out. That was a really fun conversation, and it's actually fairly brief for us. It's about 2 hours and 25 minutes long. So, you know, we're basically just in and out like a flash.
And I also told Daniel this, and I'm not just saying this because he's a great friend of mine and shit. This is probably the single best conversation I've heard about the Crazies and Martin in podcast form, and I've heard a lot of them, almost like just ad nauseum, to the point where I don't want to hear about Martin or the Crazies anymore. But this podcast was great. It goes in depth about both films and really pays a really great tribute to Romero and his work. Picking two really interesting and not as obvious films from his filmography and just going on about them and talking about Romero as a filmmaker. I found it really insightful, interesting, and I think it brought a little bit of a fresh perspective to it that I haven't heard on other podcasts. Honestly, I told Daniel this moments before we actually started the podcast. I think their talk about Martin is better than what the projection booth did as far as talking about Martin. So if that's not going to sell it for you, nothing will. And we will link this in the show notes as well. And it's definitely goddamn worth talking about. It's really, really good.
Well, thank you, Lee. Now that you've blown that much smoke up my ass, you know, I'm just, I don't know what to say. I've peaked as a podcaster and as a creative person now.
Well, yeah, here's the thing. Also, you kind of ruined, when we actually do the Crazies and Martin, you kind of ruined it for us. Our episodes are going to suck compared to what you guys did in that one episode. But
I think we'll find new things to talk about. I think there's more to say, you know. But,
yeah. But
yeah, it actually ends up being, I mean, you know, kind of, we didn't even plan it this way, but it's sort of like the Crazies is my favorite Romero and Martin is Kit's, so we ended up kind of covering our two favorite films, you know. Everybody loves Dawn of the Dead. I'm not saying Dawn of the Dead is not as good a film as the Crazies, but it's my favorite, you know, of the Romero films. So,
no, I mean there's a really solid argument to be made that the Crazies is a better film than Dawn of the Dead. I think there is. I would disagree with it just for personal preferences, but I can't fault anyone who considers the Crazies their favorite Romero film because that's a great fucking film. So. But yeah, I do have a couple things I'll mention really quick that I watched. I've been watching Narcos season 3. Have you watched it? I can't remember. Have you watched any of the Narcos?
I have not seen any of Narcos. It's something that's kind of like always in the sort of the periphery of my attention, but I've never like sat down and watched it. So you know.
I'll just say, like, for anyone who's actually watched the first 2 seasons of Narcos, this is very much keeping in line with the quality of the first 2 seasons. It's very good. Of course, it's very highly fictionalized and dramatized and shit. You know, dramatized, yeah. Beer and whiskey. I'm stupid. It does a really great job. The trailer for it looked really bad. I'll just say right offhand, when I was seeing the trailer for it on Netflix, I was a little dissuaded because it looked like it became more action heavy and shit like that and less character driven. But thankfully, getting a couple episodes in, it's very much just in tone with the first 2 seasons. Very character driven, very interesting. It hits all the points in general of the whole situation with with Escobar's cartel, and then it moves on in this season focusing on the Cali cartel. It doesn't shy away from the fact that the U.S. was manipulating all the situation for their own interests, and how a lot of the people who were trying to bring the cartels down were like caught in between the cartel and the U.S. government. it's pretty goddamn good. Like, it hits all the sort of points. In general, it follows history fairly well. And then, of course, the dramatic stuff is, they take some license here and there just to make it interesting. I like it. So far, it's worked really well. I've enjoyed it pretty much just as much as I enjoyed the first 2 seasons. So it's definitely worth watching. Again, every season is only 10 episodes, so it's a good, easy binge. Definitely worth checking out. The only other thing I'll mention is, a couple other things I'm going to mention really quick, but also related to Escobar. I watched The Infiltrator from 2016 that is on Netflix with Bryan Cranston. Are you aware of that one, Daniel?
I'm not. I've never even heard of it, but you have my interest with Bryan Cranston.
This is another one that's sort of related to the sort of Pablo Escobar kind of. It's almost like a subgenre now, where there's just been so many films and TV series and shit that have been sort of focusing around this. And this is focused on the drug trade in Miami side of things. Sure. And Bryan Cranston is one half of a team with John. Jesus, I'm gonna fuck up pronouncing his name. Leguizamo.
Leguizamo?
Yeah. Jesus Christ, I'm a fucking idiot.
I was like, "What's the John that?" Like, I had no idea. I was a little like,
Could I narrow it down for you a little bit more? Jesus Christ, yeah.
What's the John with like the slightly oddball name that Lee is going to be embarrassed about not being able to pronounce?
Yeah,
my immediate thought was it's John Krasinski.
Well, it could have been John Wayne. What the fuck?
John Wayne, John Amplis from obviously from
Martin.
So I was kind of I just went through all the Johns in my head. John Lovitz. Who knows?
Jesus.
It's funny. It's funny how like thinking about this film and then like recasting that role with just the various Johns.
John Lovitz would not work in that film. But yeah, it's interesting. Like Cranston and such are
Leguizamo.
Yeah, Leguizamo are partners. They're paired together to go undercover and try to bust the Miami end of the cartel drug trade. Pretty goddamn good, despite the fact that Cranston's like 60 now and he's trying to play like a guy who was like 30 or 40 at the time when he as the real life cop. They play off each other really well because Cranston's sort of the straight laced guy, and then the other guy is fucking. He's the more streetwise cop who doesn't necessarily play by the rules as much.
Doesn't play by the rules. Well, there's a bit of a loose cannon there. Is that a little bit of, yeah? Hold on, this is a brand new dynamic that I know. I can't imagine. Hold on, let me get a pencil.
This might become a film formula. People might want to jump on this, right? But it's very much a tone with Black Mass with Johnny Depp from 2 years ago or last year, I can't remember, where it's kind of a docudrama, but at the same time it tries to become like this sort of epic Martin Scorsese type crime film at the same time. And it doesn't quite balance those two things out very well. It doesn't quite work. At the same time, it's fairly interesting just as far as the performances are really good, but it is kind of just ABC 1, 2, 3 cut and paste crime epic kind of thing where you know what's going to happen from the beginning. You know where every character is going to end up. It also has the problem of being like 2 hours, 7 minutes. And at the same time, it's still like desperate to fill time for plot by just like introducing character after character that it just keeps dropping and then bringing back later on. So it's kind of disjointed and not that great. But I mean, if you have 2 hours and 7 minutes to waste and you can sort of like wade through that, the performances are really good. So for that alone, it's actually kind of worth watching. But, it's not a go of your way kind of thing as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Yeah, and the only other two things I'll mention.
Should not jump right on watching that as soon as we're done. Like, just go and
this is more like you have like a lazy Sunday off and you have nothing else to watch. Yeah, check it out. You got 2 hours and 7 minutes that you're just sitting on the couch, just vegetating. This might be for you.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Only other two things I'll mention, and these were movies I watched because I'm going to be doing an appearance on Gary Hill's Cinema Beef podcast. I watched Blood Tracks, which is a Swedish The Hills Have Eyes ripoff, mixed with more sort of 80s aesthetics slasher film kind of thing going on. And I watched Cut and Run, which is a late period Italian exploitation film set in South America with some sort of cannibal elements and stuff like that. It's actually a intended Wes Craven movie that fell through as far as Wes Craven directing it. And so it fell into an Italian director's hands. Ruggero Deodato, I believe his name is, and he did a couple of the cannibal films in the Italian exploitation genre. Really goddamn good, though. Like, both of these films are cheesy as fuck. They're bloody as fuck, but they're just kind of like balls up. They're just like really balls out, don't give a fuck kind of exploitation horror films. And I won't say any more about them because I want you to check me out on Gary Hill's Cinema Beef podcast when I actually talk about these films. But I just wanted to mention that I watched them. So there you go.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
So less racist than Hell of the Living Dead is what you're saying?
Oh, probably. Yeah. Yeah, definitely a little bit less racist than Hell of the Living Dead.
I was hoping you were going to say, yeah, a little bit more racist than Hell of the Living Dead, because then I would have to watch it just to see.
For Cut and Run, there's this plot of Colombian drug cartels being attacked by natives of South America, and basically they're led by a survivor of the Jonestown massacre. Like, the second in command for John Jones survived that. And he's gone into business for himself, trying to control the drug trade. So basically what he's doing is he's attacking cartel drug camps, stealing their drugs, and killing everyone in the camp. So he's employed all these natives who are running around like shooting blow darts and stabbing people to death. He's got Berryman, who played Pluto in The Hills Have Eyes. He's that actor who like has no hair and he's totally bald and a little bit disfigured or whatever, who just plays this like amazing sadistic badass assassin guy who is part of the crew, and they're just like killing all these cartel guys, and this reporter and her cameraman get mixed up in it, and it's pretty and oh, by the way, Willie Ames is in this film.
Well, that's just required watching then. Like, why are we not covering this film? Basically?
Well, I honestly, I think this is one we should cover at some point, because Willie Ames is in this film. This is like kind of around
we haven't covered anything with Willie Ames after the Zapped discussion we did, you know. So.
Yeah, this is kind of around the time Willie Ames was going into like a really quick descent into drug addiction and badness before he became, what was it? What's he now? Bible Man. Yeah.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Willie Ames running around in a Mickey Mouse t-shirt, like shooting native South Americans, and it's not. Well,
why didn't you lead with that? That's how you begin with like describing this film if you want people to watch it. It's got the second lead from Charles in Charge in a Mickey Mouse t-shirt, like killing brown people. All right, I'm there.
Yeah. I can see where my mistake was not leading with that. But yeah, I will be on Cinema Beef. I have a feeling that will show up a little bit later after our episode that we're doing tonight. I'll just link to Cinema Beef, and then, of course, when the actual episode shows up, link the fuck out of it as well. But there we go.
Great coffee.
Hey. Chad, who's that strange, somber man on the cover of that book you're reading?
Oh, that's H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, I've heard of him, but I never really got into his stuff. It's kind of strange and hard to read.
I used to think that too, but that all changed when I started listening to the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
What's that?
The H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast is a weekly podcast.
Tell me more.
These two really smart and hilarious guys give a synopsis of the story, then they talk about its background, the critical views, and what it says about the author.
Well, where can I listen?
Let me tell you, Chris, you can go to hppodcraft.com, or heck, just subscribe through iTunes. It's that easy.
Oh, Chad, I'm so excited. Now I can listen to this podcast and pretend to all my snooty friends that I actually read and understand H.P. Lovecraft.
Hey, that's what I do.
Oh, dear.
hppodcraft.com Clytus, I'm bored. What plaything can you offer me today?
An obscure body in the SK system, Your Majesty. The inhabitants refer to it as the planet Earth.
How peaceful it looks.
Most effective, Your Majesty. Will you destroy this Earth?
Destroy it utterly. Send Rick and Danny in wool rocket Ajax.
So, just destroy it?
That's what Ming said. Don't you ever listen?
Well, there's no arguing with Ming.
Hail Ming. Wait! You see those transmissions on the Visua screen?
Crow? Nightmare on Elm Street?
Chud 2? Black Belt Jones?
Nightbreed?
What's a critter?
Oh, I've seen those things.
Flash? I guess we could wait a while before the destruction.
Yeah, and watch some movies.
And talk about them.
The Hail Ming Power Hour. Disobedience to Ming. For now.
You can find us at Legion Podcast.
You can find us on Facebook.
iTunes.
We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram.
At www. You know what? Just Google it for yourself.
Just Google it, you bastages.
Hail Ming.
Breaking 2? Electric Boogaloo?
Samurai Cop.
Army of Darkness?
Flash Dance?
We might destroy the planet if it's Flashpoint.
Yeah, so I guess we can move on now and get right to our first film. Basically, you'll be covering Re-Animator first, and we'll talk about short films in brief afterwards. So we'll jump right onto Re-Animator right now. So we're going to be looking at Re-Animator from 1985.
Herbert West is at the top of his class in medical school.
How can you teach such drivel? These people are here to learn, and you're closing their minds before they even have a chance.
He's brilliant, but a little weird.
I've broken the 6 to 12 minute barrier. I've conquered brain death.
His experiments have always been unorthodox.
It was dead.
But lately they're getting out of hand. And he's just made a discovery that could wake up the dead.
Herbert West has effected reanimation in dead animal tissue.
What are you thinking? How do you feel?
You? 15 cc's of reagent being administered.
Once you wake up the dead, you've got a real mess on your hands.
Herbert, you're insane! Now what happened? I had to kill him! He's dead?
Not anymore.
Herbert West brought a lot of dead people back to life, and not one of them showed any appreciation. H.P. Lovecraft's classic tale of horror, Re-Animator.
Mr. West.
You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head? Get a job in a sideshow.
It will scare you to pieces.
Directed by Stuart Gordon, written by Dennis Pelloli, William Norris, and Stuart Gordon, of course, based on Herbert West Re-Animator by H.P. Lovecraft. This is starring, again, Jeffrey Combs, who has popped up several times in this series as Herbert West, Bruce Abbott as Dean Cain, Barbara Crampton, again, as Megan Helsley, David Gale as Dr. Carl Hill, Robert Sampson as Dean Halesley, Jerry Black as Mace, Carolyn Purdy Gordon as Dr. Herod, Peter Kent as Melvin the Reanimated, Barbara Peters as Nurse, Ian Patrick Williams as Swiss Professor, and Bunny Summers as Swiss Woman Doctor.
Swiss Woman Doctor.
Yeah, I love that.
So your Oscar caliber film when you have a character named Swiss Woman Doctor.
So I'm assuming you don't have a synopsis for this, Daniel. So
I do not know, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I pulled one from IMDB, written by Ed Sutton. So let's see what you have to say here, Ed. A medical student returns from Austria after working in regenerative experiments with a well-known scientist who died under mysterious circumstances. He enrolls at Miskatonic University, where he begs to differ with his professor on issues of the time of death, and eventually enlists his roommate to help him continue experiments on reanimating the dead, based on a story by H.P. Lovecraft. Yeah, that's pretty much the bare bones of this.
That's the first 25 minutes, yes.
Yeah.
And then they go to the morgue and shit happens. That's the last hour and 15.
So this is your first time watching it, Daniel. What are your sort of initial impressions on this one?
Sure. So just for clarity's sake, I did watch the extended cut, 45-minute version. I know there are a bunch of cuts of this, and so I did actively seek out the sort of the fullest version because I figured that would be the one, that would be the best to have my first experience. And
right.
I feel a little bit embarrassed that I've not seen this film before, but everybody who listens to this, all 4 people who listen to this know that, like, my feelings about horror in general. That is, I'm a fan of the good stuff, but I don't seek it out. Anyway, this is the good stuff. This was a ton of fun. There's some character bits. There's some kind of logical stuff that, I could nitpick this a bit, but this overall is just a really, really phenomenal example of what fun you can have sitting and watching a splatter film of this kind. I really love the glee they go to with this. I love the fact that they don't try to explain it too much. I love the fact that it's we did the Beyond, or From Beyond. We did From Beyond. And From Beyond is kind of, it's attempting to explore some of the headier issues that Lovecraft deals with. Right. This doesn't do that shit at all. This is completely, it doesn't rely on that. Instead, it relies on the sort of taking the basic idea, doing some really cool prosthetic effects, doing some really nifty gore stuff, and then basically just building a set of character relations that then will just sort of play out the rest of the film. And in that way, it's actually, by ignoring everything that Lovecraft would thought was important about this property, it actually improves the property because it's not kind of ponderous and tenditious and, sort of pretentious, which I think some of the, even the Beyond kind of, or From Beyond. So I keep saying the Beyond. From Beyond. From Beyond, as much as I enjoyed that film, it does sort of like it is sort of laying it on heavy at times, certainly. But this is light as a feather. I had a lot of fun watching it. It never drags, even in the hour and 45-minute version. Well, there's a particular scene that I know why was not included in the original edition. But other than that, it's once you kind of get the plot started, it moves. It's a lot of fun, and I just enjoyed it. Yeah, it's a really fun little film. One of the best times I've had sitting and watching a film in a while, legitimately.
Awesome, nice to hear. Yeah, this one, for the record, it is based on Herbert West Re-Animator. Although when Lovecraft wrote this, it was a 6-part series that he basically just wrote for money, and it's widely regarded as kind of like his worst fiction. Yeah, although
interestingly, I read that in high school because there was this book called Real Cinema with 2 E's, real, And it had a bunch of like short stories that had then, basically like public domain shit that then they could just publish and say, hey, look, movies were based on this. And I'd never seen most of the movies because it was like, a bunch of, the story that Death Race was based on was in there. The Day the Earth Stood Still was in there. Then the story that Re-Animator was based on. And I had no idea, like, what's Re-Animator? I'd never even heard of it. And I was maybe like 14 at the time or something, So, and then later on realized, I now know what that film is. Yeah, I just never watched it until now. I don't really remember the story, except I remember that they're bringing dead bodies back to life. And it was creepy. And that's
there's two sequels to this movie. There's Bride of Re-Animator, and then there's Beyond Re-Animator. This movie covers the first two installments, kind of the serial. And Bride of Re-Animator actually kind of covers the last two installments of the serial, and then Beyond Re-Animator is just like name in only sort of cash in kind of thing. But this is it's both like a really fun Lovecraft adaptation, but it's also like one of the most un-Lovecraft adaptations at the same time. And like I said, his original story is kind of regarded as one of the worst things he's ever written, and even he didn't like it at all. Like, he sold each installment for $5 back in the day when he wrote this, and he had to write it in a way where every episode of it had to end in a cliffhanger, and then every subsequent episode had to have some sort of recap before getting into the next part, right? So he didn't like that at all. That's not Lovecraft's format. It's not the way he wrote stuff normally, so it kind of suffers in that regard. But yeah, I mean, as far as just taking like the central idea of this and just going balls to the wall and just, hey, how much gore can we get on screen and get away with, and how much sexual depravity can we get away with on screen? This movie,
quite a bit of that.
Yeah, this movie capitalizes even better than From Beyond. Now, honestly, I think kind of From Beyond suffered because From Beyond followed Re-Animator, and the stuff they got away with in Re-Animator was like, we're not going to let you get away with that again. We're not going to.
What From Beyond does is it goes further with the sort of philosophical horror and the effects. There are a handful of effects which are sort of more ambitious, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So they kind of do the big, like, sort of the big prosthetic and the big, like, kind of disgusting face goop and everything.
Yeah,
which they don't do here. Here, most of the effects are fairly straightforward. I mean, there's a head and a medical pad. For a big chunk of the running time. And it's just got a bunch of blood around it and some like little goopy, like tendrily bits hanging off of it. It's a really effective effect, but it's not ambitious in the way.
It's the simplest effect in the world because it's just basically David Gale sitting under a table with his head up in the tray,
Exactly.
So I mean, and I think this had actually if I recall correctly, I don't know if I had the budget for From Beyond when we did that episode, but I think the budget for this was about on par.
This one is $900,000 for Re-Animator.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like they had a big budget to work with, but, I mean, they used it really well. I mean, their effects were very simple. A lot of it's just kind of zombie effects more than anything else, because these are sort of zombies in a way, in a way that, like, Frankenstein is a zombie.
From Beyond is $4.5 million. So
okay, there you go.
From Beyond is way higher. But honestly, I mean, this is. I mean, clearly they had more money, so they were able to be more, to do bigger effects.
Right.
But this is, again, this is more fun and in some ways more interesting, just because it is working in the kind of lower budget. They have to just kind of work on character basis to a large degree. Which I like. I like the fact that it does just have to be, a lot of the scares. I mean, I don't even find this scary, quite honestly.
No, because this is essentially a horror comedy. Like it's a parody of Frankenstein, is what it is.
Right. For me, the only bits where the film is really trying to kind of be creepy is, introducing our hero at the beginning. Right?
Mm-hmm. Herbert West is not a hero. He is a massively arrogant dickhead, and he's incredibly amoral and creepy, and the only reason you'd maybe root for him more than Dr. Hill is because Dr. Hill is a rapist. And that's pretty much it.
Well, I think if there is kind of one issue, I mean, just sort of thematic or not thematic, just sort of structurally with the film, is that I never quite know exactly how the film wants me to feel about Herbert West. Because at first he's supposed to be this sort of threatening presence, and I guess that's a red herring, because the film kind of shifts gears after the first hour or so, and then suddenly, no, this other guy's really the big bad we're gonna be scared of for the rest of the film. But I mean, our second lead, Bruce Abbott.
Yeah, Bruce Abbott.
Dan Kane, excuse me, not Dean Kane.
Yeah, that's a different guy.
That's a different guy. Kane there, he's our kind of all-American boy, sort of med student, fucking the hot girl, kind of having the best life ever. And then creepy guy, which I was thinking about the lodger in that sequence, when the guy kind of moves in, and it's like, no, I just need the basement. It's like, well, this is not a bad sign at all, And they hand him a bunch of money. It's like, well, I guess we're just gonna take it then. It's like this never ends well for anyone.
I just need the basement, and oh wait, your beloved cat has disappeared.
Oh yeah, how's that gonna end up? Yeah. Once he kind of sees the process of, you can bring a cat back to life and torture it, like, oh my god.
Yeah. They throw the part where so I just want to mention the fact that this is kind of a comedy parody makes the fact work that you have the scene with Jeffrey Combs with a obviously fake cat on his back running around. You can buy it because it is a comedy essentially. So you have that part, and then you get to the part where
they throw the cat at the wall. Little chunk, and it falls.
And there's a little chunk of the cat that hits the wall and runs down the fucking wall. Like, that's such a great effect, and it was just like it was by mistake. It was like it wasn't intended to have a little chunk fall down the wall. It was just a happy occurrence. And by God, it's gross. This movie is so gross.
It really enjoys its splatter nature. It really is just it's right there. And then he brings the cat back to life 5 minutes later, to prove, well, it's dead now, right? He picks it up and then he injects it into the brain. Yes, into the brain, of course. Where else would you inject it?
Right.
The cat comes back to life. So why is it making that sound? It's like, maybe because its larynx doesn't exist anymore. You asshole. Its back is broken. And I mean, you want to talk about the fake cat on his back. I mean, the dead cat coming back to life is the fakest effect in the film, but it sort of works in that, it's clearly an animatronic, and we're clearly going to do other stuff with this later. So, it's fine. But,
and also there's the contrast of the fact that the dead cat they had in the fridge was a real dead cat.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so you look at that, and then you look in comparison to the stuff they were using afterwards. It's like, there's a little bit of a contrast there. It's just,
but it's still. I mean, it's a fun sequence. But again, as a I'm a cat lover. I have a cat. I've had cats all my life, and I'm like, oh man, that's just put it out of its misery. That cat does not deserve anything like this.
Yeah, no, it's hard to watch, and you root for the cat when it's beating the shit out of dead Kane and Herbert West. It's running at them and jumping at them and shit. It's like, yeah, you go, cat. Fuck these people up. It's like you deserve to go back to oblivion, and fuck these guys for bringing you back.
I was kind of thinking about Flatliners a bit. Watching this film,
it's very
which is clearly kind of inspired by the same kind of concept. Yeah, and I was thinking we should probably cover at some point. I think it might be fun to talk about that,
especially since there's a remake coming out soon.
Yeah, there's a remake. It's got there's a remake happening.
Keith Sutherland is apparently in that as well. Maybe, and I don't know if it's a remake so much as it is a semi-sequel, because from what I understand, he's playing the same character he played in Flatliners. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
No, my feeling is, if there is kind of one thing, I mean, you're right. It's kind of a parody. It's a remake of Frankenstein. It's doing the same thing plot wise. And there's one thing that sort of I don't buy. It's the our man Kane just kind of buys into this immediately. Within 15 minutes, he's like, "Yes, we have to go inject an actual human corpse." And I think the sort of structure of Flatliners, where they're all kind of med students, they all kind of discover this together, and then sort of work in that. So there's not one guy who's no, we have to push forward, and then the other guy just has to go along to make the plot work. I mean, I think that's the one thing that kind of creaks for me in terms of a character motivation. Like, I don't get why Kane is like so immediately like, yeah, I'm going to get on board with this because clearly this is not like a healthy thing to be doing in your basement, with no.
Yeah, the only part there where it maybe semi rings true is where he becomes as desperate as Herbert West, because the dean, from the direction and sort of whispers in the ears of Dr. Hill, basically expels both of them from the fucking school and basically ruins both of their potentials for ever having a career. It's like, hey, you're not only collaborating with Herbert West, who is doing this really weird, dangerous shit, you're also fucking my incredibly hot daughter, so fuck you. We're getting you out of here. So, at a certain point, he has nothing left to lose. But, yeah, no, you're right. The initial kind of falling in with Herbert West is, fuck no. Why would anyone fall in with Herbert West? Because even from the beginning, he's an incredibly creepy, arrogant, distasteful piece of shit.
I think what they're trying to do is to sort of make it to where the two of them are sort of buddies during that sort of middle section.
Well, there's almost
where they think you think he's the threat at first, right? You think he's the like, creepy guy, he's the killer, right? But then he kind of joins forces with Kane, and then they sort of are working together, and then you can just kind of get like the performance. When you look at Combs' performance, I mean, he's clearly kind of toned it down just a little bit. I mean, you get a little bit more of a camaraderie between them, which I think you have to do to make the film work. I mean, they can't be at odds with each other in this kind of tone of a film for that big chunk. And then, so I feel like watching it, I don't really know how I'm supposed to feel about him, because like at first he's kind of like, he's definitely arrogant. He's definitely an arrogant shithead, but he's kind of an arrogant shithead with good reason, if he really does have this discovery that's going to change the world, and he's trying to save like everybody in the world's life, there is a sort of sense of, okay, I get that.
He's got this amoral scientific drive, like the worst fears of what a scientist actually is kind of what he embodies. And there is this weird kind of bromance thing that sort of comes between the two, where you can even see Herbert West actually gives a shit about Dan's, his life. He brings him on as a partner, and he does have dialogue where he recognizes that Dan is actually a potentially brilliant doctor. So he wants him on his team, and Dan's moral qualms are just what makes him, kind of doubt everything that's going on. But even then, he still falls in. But,
the film just kind of moves on and doesn't really give us enough time to really sit and think about these issues, to its credit. But I do think that is sort of one of those just kind of structural things where once they decided to kind of structure the film this way, they kind of have to have this little bit of a creaky midsection where you don't quite know where things are going and how you're supposed to feel about it,
Yeah, ultimately it becomes a delivery for look at our special effects because they're really goddamn good.
And look at how much fun we're having. I mean, it's so much fun because the serum stuff that they give it's just like
it's the glow stick stuff.
It's not a day glow. It's a glow stick stuff. Yeah,
that's exactly what they used.
Yeah, it's super bright glowing green, and anytime you have that color in a film, you're golden. Like that.
Oh yeah, and it pops out. Like if you look at the way the movie is shot, the palette is very muted. And then that green just pops right up. Like everything else is pretty dark. So
yeah, the film also just talking about the lighting. The film also gets a lot of mileage out of like the swinging lamps in certain sequences, particularly in that cat sequence where they know that effect doesn't look very good, so they just swing a light around.
Yeah,
just don't look at it. Just don't look at it. It's fine.
Follow the light. Don't worry about anything else. Just go on. Yep. Yeah.
Then they go and they do they inject a person.
Mm-hmm.
They have to look at the bodies, and they
that muscle bound guy that they injected, by the way, was like one of the stunt doubles for Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I believe it.
He
looks great. Lots of nudity here.
There's
Lots
a
of
lot,
math in this
yeah.
film.
There's a little bit of Barbara Crampton. Well, actually, there's a lot of Barbara Crampton.
There's quite a bit of Barbara Crampton. So we skipped over a scene because it's not in the original cut. There's an extended sequence of basically Barbara Crampton and Bruce Abbott.
Gale. Bruce Abbott is the boyfriend, Dan Kane, for Barbara Crampton's character, and they had that little sequence where they're talking, and then it cuts immediately to them fucking, and then you see lots of Barbara Crampton there for a brief few seconds, and which is definitely nice. And then you see her again in the not so nice sequence where the decapitated yet reanimated Dr. Hill decides to redefine the idea of giving head to a woman.
Yes, indeed. You gotta say, like, she looks great in this. I mean, I hate to be that obvious, but no, she looks phenomenal in this.
And she still looks great today, by the way, and she's pushing 60. She's a beautiful woman.
No, I've seen some more recent photos, but yeah, no, she's great in this. She's so much fun. I love her performance. She kind of gets that one scene. I mean, she's really. It's a shame she's not in more of it. I wish she'd been kind of one of the guys, kind of along with the thing. But she gets the girl role, so she basically gets to be the girlfriend at the beginning and then the victim at the end. And it's sort of unfortunate because I think she's great in what she's in of this.
Actually, this and From Beyond are both just really brave performances from her. Like, as an actress, really fucking great and incredibly underrated. Like, a lot of people don't give her as much credit as she deserves for her performance.
I mean, imagine being an actor and you're like, you read a script and your go-to thing is, so, and then a disembodied head rapes you. Like, that's and she plays it beautifully. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's amazing in that scene of both being, of playing it for the obvious sort of comedy value, the obvious sort of, the black comedy, but also plays it as sort of a legitimate threat, and I think that if there's one scene that was really not going to work, like, I can't imagine how that worked on paper. Quite honestly. I mean, that's just that could be like the worst thing ever committed to film, and yet it completely works in context. It's actually a sort of minor masterpiece in how you can actually use sexual menace properly in a film. And I'm not trying to really say, oh, look at how great this is, but it's pretty phenomenally done once you accept that it's going to be done.
Yeah, if this was stuck in an Italian exploitation film, it just would have been nasty as fuck. Like, if it was something lesser, it just would have been nasty as fuck. But the tone this film sets from the very beginning, and the way the actors play everything, like, I think everybody in this is phenomenal. And they just sell it and they make it work. Like, the tone is consistent throughout the entire film, and it doesn't feel off. I mean, it's shocking, it's jarring, but it doesn't feel off. It doesn't feel like anything you wouldn't expect to see in this film. Hats off to what they managed to accomplish in this film with those sort of ideas, especially in 1985 when it was like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, no, I mean, this film, I mean, it really does seem, chopped out of time in a way, because it is this sort of horror comedy. It is this sort of schlocky thing, but it's also remarkably sophisticated in the way that it does some of this. And I mean, it is just sort of a. I think there's sort of a, especially having seen From Beyond already, there is a bit of lightning in a bottle to Re-Animator. I don't know I don't know you could ever have done this again.
Right.
But yeah, so then you get there's quite a bit of plot in this, in terms of, I mean, because you spend the first 30 minutes kind of setting up the character dynamics, and then all that just sort of plays out in the last hour. You get quite a bit of kind of double crossing, and sort of the dean, who's also the dad of the girlfriend, is now going to kind of come after them. He's already expelled them, so he shows up while they're injecting the corpse, and then he ends up being killed. Yeah. And it's like, when are you ever going to get a body this fresh again? Let's inject him.
Yeah.
And then
why not?
They get interrupted by the cops halfway through, And so they just go, well, he's just a crazy person now. Like, I don't know, he just went crazy and like killed a guy. I don't know how that happened, you know?
So, yeah, it's not explicitly implied as well in basically any cut of this film, because there's deleted stuff still on the floor, depending on, even with the like extended cut, where David Gale's character of Dr. Hill he's got sort of hypnotic suggestion powers.
He's like mind control powers or something,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So
he really does it in like one scene, just like it's a really overt thing in one scene, and then it's never really
so he uses his new revolutionary laser surgery, which is basically a laser lobotomy, to make these new corpses that he's reanimating open to suggestion. So he makes the Dean open to suggestion as a pawn for him initially. Like, there's interesting stuff going on in this film that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Yeah, no, it's a really, I mean, it's interesting that like he has the sort of mind control powers, and Jeffrey Combs has the serum, the reanimation serum, and you know, together they have like this power. Like if they just worked together, like, you know, they could have literally like taken over the world. You know,
this is a situation of two like-minded pricks who can't exist in the same time space because they're so alike that they hate each other.
Right. You know, Herbert West, Jeffrey Combs' character, he kind of shows up and he's in class and he's literally like mocking the guy by
breaking the fucking pencil. Yeah.
And next time, bring a pen. That's such a great little moment.
And that builds such like cool suspense too. It's like, it's just he breaks the first one and then he picks up the next one, and it's like you're waiting for him to break that shit. And yeah, I suggest you get a pen next time, Mr. West. It's like, yeah, really good stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, my read is that West underestimates Dr. Hill.
Yeah.
You know, he thinks he's just a hack.
Yeah.
When in reality, he has his own, like, kind of brilliant thing that he's done and just hasn't really talked about, which is sort of fascinating. I mean, I kind of get the sense that Dr. Hill knows that this reanimation is possible. Like, he's kind of done the research, but he's, like, holding back so as to not, like, reveal it to the world. Because he doesn't have it. He can't do it.
Yeah. By the way, the doctor that Jeffrey Combs, Herbert West was studying under was Hans Gruber, and this was before Die Hard.
Nice.
So they make mention of the fact that Hill is just a hack compared to Gruber. And basically, when West comes into Hill's circle of influences, if I can get the few notes, you know, the key notes that Gruber had from Herbert West, I can really perfect my own ideas and really, you really do something with it. So yeah, it's this really massive conflict between these two super egos who are just, they hate each other immensely, and they're both arrogant pricks, and they both have their own designs. And yeah, it's just really, like, again, the performances are so good. It's just like you buy into all these characters. You buy into the David Gale is this arrogant professor who lusts after the hot young Barbara Crampton, and Herbert West is this amoral scientist who cares about nothing other than his research and achieving his goals, and they play off each other really well. And it's like you can't root for any of them. You're rooting basically for Dan Kane because he's really the only. He's caught between both of these guys, and he's trying his best to not get his girlfriend killed. Is basically the.
I'm rooting for Barbara Crampton to just leave all these shitheads behind.
Which she should have done. Yeah, because you have that.
Not even her dad. No. It's fine. No, I don't need to be involved in this. Yeah. Dad's a creepster too. It's fine.
Well, the dad redeems himself a bit because he was reanimated incredibly quickly, so he still retains a lot of his initial personality. Which is a thing in this movie. Like, the longer you're dead, the worse off you are if you're brought back. Also, he's lobotomized. He has antagonism against Dr. Hill and everybody else. And he tries his best to actually save his daughter at the end and gets pulled apart by the other quote-unquote zombies. And in a sequence that is fucking amazing, where it's just like batshit is what the sequence that term was created for. It's like,
that final I actually love that final bit just structurally, because you know, we're in the last 20 minutes of a film like this, you're kind of like, all right, so we're going to get some big effect sequence, but it's basically just kind of coasting plot wise, right?
Right.
But it doesn't. This film really doesn't. It really gives us twists up until the very end. Hill and West are really well matched for each other because West kind of comes in. He's got his own plan, which is basically, let's overdose these motherfuckers. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I don't know you thought that through, but all right, I'm with you.
It's very scientific. More serum. Let's just put more serum in them.
Let's just give them like 10 times a dose, and then they're done. No, I love he kind of shows up. He's kind of and he's doing the like I'm the secret badass thing. They're releasing Barbara Crampton in the background. In another movie, it's like, oh, he's won, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Hill's like, oh well, I have my plans too. And then it turns out, oh no, I've got every cadaver in here is now like controlled by me, and you don't understand that they're all going to come up and batshit's going to happen. I mean, I really love that moment. It made me really respect the film. That we get one more. There's one more twist. It's not this supposedly genius scientist just becomes completely stupid in the last 5 minutes. Like he knows what's going on. He's laid a trap for these guys. So now again, it's not like the most clever plotting ever, but it's clever enough, and it's a great moment.
Yeah, the sequels cheapen this shit, by the way. Honestly, I wouldn't even recommend you watch the sequels because the Bride of Re-Animator picks up right from this film where Dr. Hill comes back. Even though you saw his head squished and thrown against a wall, he comes back in the second film, and this time he has bat wings grafted to his skull so he can fly around. His disembodied head can fly around. So you can kind of guess where that film fucking goes.
So Bride of Re-Animator in 1990. I wonder if there's a film in 1989 that might have inspired those kinds of concepts.
No.
Bat wings.
I don't think so. I think they just, hey, what goofy shit can we do in the sequel? I don't even know if Stuart... I don't think Stuart Gordon did the... No, it was Brian Usna who produced this one, did the directing for the sequel. And he's...
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and he's not as good. He's just stick to producing, let's put it that way.
Well, again, that's a good moment to say. I mean, Stuart Gordon, directs the shit out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if... I was an admirer of From Beyond. I was an admirer of the direction and the sort of structure of it. But this is a whole other level of really solid, low budget, good decisions.
And he cast his wife in this film before From Beyond, and she didn't even have to, in From Beyond, she didn't have to change her wardrobe any. Same character.
That's awesome.
I wanted to mention Lovecraft's story that this is based on is actually one of the first fictional depictions of zombies as scientifically reanimated corpses. So it's not the Haitian voodoo stuff. The special effects department went through 25 gallons of fake blood for this one, which I can definitely
that seems low, actually.
It seems a little low, doesn't
25,
it?
Really? Only 25?
Yeah. Again, using their budget very well, apparently. Apparently they made us think they splattered more shit out there than we actually saw. Let's see here.
I mean, it's all on screen, I guess, is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, they were very careful in the amount that they actually used, yeah.
Yeah. They actually initially wanted to shoot this in black and white on 16 millimeter, apparently, to make it really gritty. Kind of glad they didn't, honestly. Yeah. I think this works as best as
color is such a big part of this. I mean, I think that makes me think they were originally going for a much more explicit Frankenstein parody, because shoot this in black and white and then give it a few Dutch angles, and this is basically let's pretend we're doing Frankenstein again,
And also, if people are considering this a parody of Frankenstein, it's not Young Frankenstein. Why even bother watching it?
Right. It's more just kind of fun than explicitly funny. Although, greatest moment in the film for me, I'm just gonna say the funniest bit is when he's cut off the head and he's got it. He holds it. It doesn't stay up in the pan. So he takes the little thing that you put the notepads on, the little sticker.
Right.
And he sticks it on there, and I swear I winced when he just like threw the head on top of it. And I'm just like, oh, that just seems wrong. Like, I know you just chopped the guy's head off with a shovel, but somehow that just seems to literally add insult to injury. To be like, well, how else are we gonna stand up? Just, put a.
And by the way, interesting coincidence here: the decapitation with the shovel gag was also used in Day of the Dead. And the release date between these two movies was only like a month apart in 1985. So, interesting coincidence there.
There were some moments where I was like, I mean, the whole like surgery of zombies, and it's clear that these ideas were a little bit in the air. That
it was in the zeitgeist at the time. Yeah,
they're both playing with similar ideas, and honestly, I mean, I love Day of the Dead, but this is clearly a better film than Day of the Dead.
It's more fun. It's definitely more fun, and it moves quicker. I mean, it works on that level. Definitely, it moves much faster. Also, of course, very obvious. The opening theme borrows heavily from Psycho, and that was intentional. Again, this is another Richard Brand score. He basically ate Bernard Herrmann's score for Psycho with this, and because it was a parody. So it was like, okay, well, we'll play around with that, make it a little bit more playful. Although he actually did go over budget here. It took him longer to do the score, so he actually had to pay $1,500 out of his own pocket to make up for the expenses of taking longer to do the score. Yeah,
well, it's a great score. I actually really liked it. Also, just as long, I mean, just the Psycho reference, just Lovecraft had written correspondence with Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho. So there is a...
Robert Bloch was a disciple of Lovecraft's. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah. Budget for this, of course, $900,000. Box office was $2.02 million. So it did fairly well. That was sort of the impetus to, it's like, hey, we'll let you do From Beyond, which failed miserably. DVD releases for this. Elite released a 1 and 2 disc version of this in 2002. I have the 2 disc version of that. Anchor Bay released a similar version in 2007, which basically carries over most of the Elite discs stuff, although it has a little bit extra stuff itself. And Image Entertainment released a DVD in 2012, and Arrow has a Blu-ray in 2017. It was just released, I think, a month ago or so, and it looks pretty goddamn impressive. Those are your best options to search for if you're looking to grab this up. Although it is on YouTube as well, as you said. So
yeah. Although the version that I found on YouTube was the hour 25-minute version, and it frankly it looks like shit. The version I watched, I mean, clearly I bought the really expensive Blu-ray. I didn't torrent this or anything at all.
No, that would never happen.
Yeah, the version I watched looked great. I'm just gonna say that, and it was an hour and 45 minutes long. When I was looking for like the different DVD versions, I found a review where people were talking about like how phenomenal this particular transfer is. This is one that, like, if you're gonna buy it, buy the good version. I mean,
Yeah, I have the Elite release, and it's not the extended version. Like, all the stuff that is missing from the extended version is in the extras as like extended scenes and stuff. But as much as it's probably the best it looked up to that point, it doesn't look that great. It looks like a decent VHS transfer more than anything else, really. So, yeah, find the fucking Arrow Blu-ray or whatever else you can find online that's HD and go for that, because goddamn, this film is a visual delight as far as like the effects and everything on screen.
If I had watched, I mean, I did kind of click around the shitty version on YouTube if I had watched that version, I would not have had nearly as much enjoyment of the film. I would say that a lot of what I enjoyed about it was the like super high quality transfer that I watched. So take that as you will.
Yeah, right on.
Mr. Carter, have you read this book?
Well, yeah. I leafed through it a bit.
Have you spoken any of its contents aloud?
Why?
Legend has it that some of the words can act as keys, which open invisible doors. Doors which cross the wall of sleep. Necronomicon, also known as Al-Azif, the Howling of Devils. Some say it doesn't exist. But your uncle strongly believed that it did exist and that in the hands of certain individuals it can become a potent tool. He believed H.P. Lovecraft was such a person. I've never really known, Mr. Carter. How did your uncle die?
His body was never found.
I sometimes believe he finally succeeded in proving his theory.
What do you mean?
Well, the book suggests some repulsive things. Well, shortly after Abdul al-Hazred finished writing the Necronomicon in 738 AD, he is said to have been seized by an invisible monster and devoured in broad daylight before a terrified mob.
You believe my uncle was devoured by an invisible monster?
I don't believe anything, Mr. Carter. But there are some phenomena which are impossible to explain. I knew a man who dreamt every night that he was falling. One morning, he was found dead in his bed. All his bones were shattered. And in 1963, another man attempted to steal a gargoyle from an English cathedral. He was found dead, disemboweled at the foot of the gargoyle, whose jaws, of course, were stained with his blood. I know dozens of such stories, Mr. Carter. All of them true, and all of them unexplainable.
Professor, have you ever heard of a man named Harley Warren?
How do you know about Warren?
Somehow, I met him last night.
Young man, what have you done? Harley Warren was a dangerous maniac. Your uncle met him in the trenches in the First World War, and they worked together in the 20s. Whatever may have happened, whatever should happen, be very careful around Warren.
Okay, we're going to look at two short films as well. One's an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft. One's a semi-adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft and more of an exploration of his writings. First one we're going to look at is Call of Cthulhu from 2005, directed by Andrew Lehman, who is he's either associated or the head of the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. I didn't go too in deep on his background, but he has done some adaptations of H.P. Lovecraft. Recently did Whisper in Darkness. And he is actually well known for doing audio book versions of H.P. Lovecraft stuff that you can find online. And he's appeared on the H.P. Lovecraft podcast, hppodcraft.com, which is one of my favorite podcasts. He's done some of the readings for the two gentlemen who run that podcast, and he's awesome. So good on Andrew Lehman for doing this. Of course, the writers, based on the short story by H.P. Lovecraft, written by Sheen Brannery, who basically just adapted this. And it's starring Matt Forer as the man, John Bolin as the listener, Ralph Lucas as Professor Angel, Chad Pfeiffer, who is another, he's one of the co-hosts of the hppodcraft.com podcast, as Henry Wilcox.
I'm starting to get a sense of how this got made. Okay, continue.
Yeah. Susan Zucker as landlady. Califatic Pool as bartender. Wow, that's quite the name. John Kelm-Antesky as Professor Hall. Jason Owens as Professor Quintana. D. Grisby Poland as Professor Touchton. David Mersault as Inspector Legrasse. And Barry Lynch as Professor Webb. And this is a short film. It's only about, 56 minutes or something along those lines. And it is done in the style of a 1920s silent film. Mm-hmm. And they go to excruciating detail to make this feel like an authentic 1920s film. Like, they go beyond what Quentin Tarantino did with, like, The Grindhouse, where, hey, let's put some neat filters on our film and make it feel like it's an old film from the 70s. Here they go all out and try to make a legit silent film. And I'm really interested in seeing what your thoughts are on this, Dan.
I think this is real. I mean, I guess the joke I was making there is this is very obviously made by people who are deeply in love with H.P. Lovecraft, who are not necessarily professional film. I mean, it feels a little bit like a student film to me,
right?
And which isn't. I mean, that's not to gainsay it. That's just to say it kind of has this student film kind of aesthetic. It's obviously not made with a lot of money. Clearly, they kind of spent the money where they needed to. It's also very much made in 2005, meaning that, you know, before DV cameras kind of got, it looks a little bit like it's shot on video, you know, just black and white video with like really cool, you know, and, you know, just to that degree, it doesn't sell itself as like, this was actually made in 1926. It sells itself as a bunch of students or, you know, kind of low budget filmmakers made something that looked like it was made in 1926.
It's a visual pastiche is what it is.
Yeah, and what I really admire is the handmade quality of like big chunks of it. The sort of German expressionist, the paper mache almost art in pieces of it. The stuff that really seems to come from that era. That's where they really put their attention to. That's the stuff that really looks phenomenal. That's the stuff that I think is like bar none, like really, really phenomenally good.
Very, very Dr. Caligari in its
presentation. Yeah, very, very much in that tradition. So all that stuff, I've got no complaints about. That's not the issue that I have. For me, it's like, it's not even an issue. It's like, look, it's made the way it's made. You know, I mean, you know, they did what they could with what they had, you know, and ultimately this is the film that resulted from it. In terms of the film itself, in terms of like how, you know, the story and, you know, how it's made and directorial choices and, you know, like the actual sort of cinema of it, I'm kind of talking about the production value, because I think the production value is slightly lacking just from what I would want it to be as like the great adaptation of Call of Cthulhu, which I have not read Call of Cthulhu. Unfortunately, I didn't get the time to do that this week. But structurally, I really love the film. I really wish I could get a really like nice version of this to watch, because the version that I had, it is on YouTube. It has like Portuguese subtitles that show up, and then suddenly you can't read some of the original English title cards. And so there are kind of big chunks of this where I wish I could have gotten a little bit more sucked into it to really kind of follow it along the way the film wants me to. But overall, I do really enjoy it. I do really admire it. I think, you know, if I'm critical, it's because it's good enough that I wish it was one step better, you know, and really kind of sold that like 20s aesthetic a little bit better.
It definitely feels like something that they should try another shot at, where they could bring it into the digital age, because it's 2005. This is not high def. I mean, people have asked for this on Blu-ray, and it's just not possible because it's not a high def possible kind of thing where they can like make it any better on Blu-ray, honestly.
Right. The worst thing that digital video does, or at least, you know, it's less of an issue today, but high contrast photography, you know, and grain are like the two things that like digital video in 2005 did not do very well.
Yeah.
And those are the things, you know, a lot of the footage looks like, you know, in terms of they're trying to do the high contrast photography, and it just looks like they're shining spotlights on people's faces from know, 6 feet away. And that sort of thing, like if you're familiar with silent film and you've kind of watched enough of it, that's not what silent film looked like at that time. You know, that's maybe 10 years later, you know, they're kind of doing that kind of stuff, but then they're not doing it on that kind of digital stage. And so it immediately makes me think, oh, it's a bunch of film students, you know, like shining lights into those faces, you know, as opposed to really kind of drawing me into the film. That's in some ways just the sort of the failure born out of ambition. You know, where they were trying to do this thing that was as authentic as they can make it. And I believe they did that. I admire the filmmaking. It's just sort of, you can't talk about it without saying, like, look, there are just some technical issues that they just couldn't get around, you know?
Yeah, as like a student film level thing, like this is amazing. The achievement they've gotten here, and it had a $50,000 budget. So I mean,
and every penny of that is on screen. Like, there's no question of that.
And what I love about this, though, is that it is a really good sort of combination of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and like King Kong, basically. Like it's kind of like that, because you do see Cthulhu here in brief, and he's very much presented and animated in a way that King Kong was in the original King Kong.
There's kind of a claymation aspect, but like in a good way, and there's a kind of a papier-mâché quality to him.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with the Call of Cthulhu, this does follow the story very well. Essentially, the central idea is the discovery of this idol of Cthulhu, and then the investigation and discovery of the cult of Cthulhu, which is worshipping Cthulhu, who is... He's become the pop culture icon of Lovecraft, where everyone just talks about Cthulhu and the Cthulhu mythos. But Cthulhu actually, as written by Lovecraft, is actually not a major figure in his pantheon of gods. He's actually more of a high priest of the other gods in his pantheon. But at the same time, he's still this incredibly powerful alien entity who, if you looked upon him, you'd go mad, and he could destroy the world if he ever, came awake again. So the idea is the Cult of Cthulhu is trying to awaken him from his sleep in the city of Ryla, which is deep under the Pacific Ocean. So basically, this is the investigation of the cult. It shows the episodes of people finding the cult out in like Louisiana, somewhere in the bayou. And by the way, if you're going to do a presentation like this, 1920s silent era film, you're pre-Hays Code. You could have had those cultists nude, because the cultists are in the actual original story are basically described as being like nude heathens who are writhing around and trying to get Cthulhu resurrected and stuff. So you could have went that far if you'd wanted to. You could have done that. So just saying,
it might have offended the modern sensibilities of the Lovecraft obsessives.
I don't know. I think it would have worked. I think it would have worked, but that's a minor nitpick. But yeah, it basically revolves around the various different people who are encountering the the Cthulhu cult, the subsequent resurrection of Ryla and Cthulhu for at least a brief amount of time, and the accounts of that. And this film, I think it does a really good job of that. I think the strength of this plays to the actual Lovecraft story, where it's a silent film, so your exposition is very limited. So you don't get to describe a lot, so you don't get to spoil a lot. It plays on that idea of the less you know, the more scary it is. Just the German expressionist Dr. Caligari angles play into the descriptions Lovecraft gives of the city of Ryla, and his other descriptions of just like alien architecture that humans encounter when they encounter these forbidden lost places. They're not aesthetically pleasing to our eyes, where they're very alien and weird. And I think that really is a big strength on this film. It just really portrays that kind of idea very well. I really do love this adaptation. I mean, it does have its flaws, like you pointed out, but for what they accomplished here, I think it was really an amazing job, and at 56 minutes or so, or whatever it is, it's a very brief watch.
Yeah, I think this one is like 47 or 48 minutes. I think the other one is like 56 minutes.
Yeah, so. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, this does its job in its brief amount of time, and like I was telling you, it ignited my love of silent films to the point where I want to do some more silent films this October. So, and at the very least, it's accomplished that. But I think it's very much worth checking out. The only version on YouTube, again, as we talked about, unfortunately has some shitty subtitles that at times impede the title cards. But
if you're an English and not Portuguese speaker,
yeah.
If you speak Portuguese, you're golden. But
all of our Portuguese listeners, just jump on that shit. But still, honestly, I don't think it impedes it that much. And
it's more just like it sort of takes me out, and I'm trying to figure out, is there something interesting going on in the
okay, and also to be fair, I can see that coming from your perspective, where you're new to this and you're jumping right on it. Like anyone who knows the story, they can just sink right into this and give a fuck, right?
Which is again, I mean, I think if there's, I mean, it's again not a negative thing that the film is clearly made for the Lovecraft fans.
Oh yeah,
it's made by and for Lovecraft obsessives. So it's designed to kind of tell that story, and I think it tells it very well. I mean, there's some really compelling stuff. I mean, it's a little bit of a style exercise, but not necessarily in a bad way. Just sort of in a, okay, we've decided to do this. It doesn't wear it. It's welcome. And big chunks of this look phenomenal. I mean, again, any of that sort of paper mache kind of stuff, any of the German expressionist, the Caligari kind of paperwork and the set design and everything, all of that looks absolutely top-notch phenomenal. There's no complaints from me about any of that.
And it presents that horror trope of people continuing to make the same mistake over and over again, because it sort of ends on the idea of the person who's reading these accounts is probably going to investigate Cthulhu and the Cthulhu cult, and is probably going to end up repeating events and being damned just like everyone else who has sort of dived into this problem, this conspiracy and shit. So it's got that going for it. I think it's a really great production, and it's definitely well worth looking at. Yeah, and so we'll also just briefly go over Out of Mind, the Stories of H.P. Lovecraft from 1998. And this is directed by Raymond St. John, based on H.P. Lovecraft's writings, of course, and also written by Raymond St. John. This is starring the amazing Christopher Heyerdahl playing H.P. Lovecraft here.
Which is the reason to watch the film.
Peter Farbridge is Harley Warren, Art Kitchen as Randolph Carter, and Michael Seinlakoff as Henry Armitage. This is essentially a short film that's in part the case of Charles Dexter Ward. That was the film we did a couple episodes ago. The Resurrection is also based on. It's got that same sort of central idea there of a ancestor reincarnating themselves through their descendants. So there's that in there centrally. But this is much more focused on trying to explore H.P. Lovecraft's sort of thoughts, his sort of ideas on fiction, on life, the basis behind his writings. So you have these little clips here of what are proposed to be like a recording of H.P. Lovecraft on film talking about his writings. And what these are derived from are actually his actual writings, his correspondence, and a little bit of his fiction as well, but mostly his correspondence. And H.P. Lovecraft, he talked with a lot of the authors of his day. A lot of the authors that he influenced were all sort of pen pals of his. He was like constantly writing letters. Like there's thousands of letters of his that are in his museum collection, I guess. Yeah, this is basically trying to focus on what H.P. Lovecraft's sort of central philosophies were about his writing and his sort of stance on existence and the universe and things like that. So I'm interested in knowing what your sort of thoughts on this are, Daniel.
Yeah, all the bits with Heyerdahl as Lovecraft, sort of talking to camera, and all the, when you're actually sort of getting Lovecraft's thoughts on his own work, kind of through that. I mean, honestly, the production on that is good enough that for, the first like 15 seconds, I was like, wait, did he actually, like, I didn't recognize the guy or anything. I'm just like, is that actually Lovecraft? Then you think like
some people actually thought that. Some people actually
Lovecraft's like life, like, no, clearly this can't actually be it. And then like eventually you realize, oh, they just kind of put a filter on it. It's fine, Like, all that stuff is phenomenal. I really loved sort of that aspect of it. The performance is, it's tough to say like dude sits and reads lines into a camera and say it's a great performance, but it is like you really get a sense of who Lovecraft must have been in life by listening to it.
Yeah, he's got nobody really knows what Lovecraft sounded like, but his speech patterns and the way he does his performance, they do give a sense of character there. They do give a sense of authenticity that is really well done.
Well, and it touches on this sort of. I mean, I see this as less sort of about a particular. It's almost less about Lovecraft than it is about, or less about Lovecraft stories and more about sort of Lovecraft as author, as sort of the way we remember him. Because it's Lovecraft, and then like the dude gets the the book, and then turns out that like Lovecraft was actually experiencing some of this stuff, or was sort of experimenting with this stuff, and it's sort of so exploring this idea. I mean, it's doing that like standard, like what if Lovecraft really was experimenting with Cthulhu, sort of this is the 90s and this is just how we like do science fiction.
I think I sense maybe there's a little bit confusion there from you, and I just want to maybe like elaborate on that a bit if I can.
Sure. I will admit that like this did not, like, other than the sequences with Heyerdahl as Lovecraft, this did not grab me. The aesthetics are very like Red Shoe Diaries for me. So,
God damn, that is spot on. That is fucking spot on. I did not think of that before now, but it's like, David Duchovny could have been in this production.
So what you're going to tell me is it's not actually Lovecraft that he's meeting. It's some other guy who was I don't know. Like I completely missed like all the details of this storyline. I apologize. I kind of watched it quickly while like reading stuff about it. So
are you saying this is the gay version of the Red Shoe Diaries?
I kind of don't know what's going on in this story. Like that's sort of where I'm
okay, yeah.
I kind of get the general gist of like what it's trying to do, I think, but I don't really know what's happening in any given moment. Like I couldn't describe the plot of this to you.
Yeah, because the plot is it's very weird, and I totally admit that. And anyone who's a novice to Lovecraft is going to be confused with this to a certain degree. What this basically sort of hinges on is Lovecraft's writings about dreamlands. He was very big into that idea of what we dream is actually it is our actual realm of reality. And in some cases, it's much more real than what we perceive as reality. The idea of people can meet themselves and meet other people in the dreamlands and encounter each other outside of basically time and space. So you sort of see that in this production where the guy playing Randolph Carter encounters H.P. Lovecraft in the dreamlands, essentially, and H.P. Lovecraft is kind of seeing his future in the dreamlands. Like he's seeing where he'll end up being like remembered as a guy who wrote fiction and appears on people's t-shirts and shit. But also at the same time, it adapts Case of Charles Dexter Ward, where Randolph Carter's descendant is trying to reincarnate himself into his body. He's trying to make Randolph Carter read from the Necronomicon certain passages, and then that will allow him to come out of death and, inhabit his body and shit like that. So there's a little bit of that in there. So basically what it does is it touches on a lot of different aspects of Lovecraft's fiction and tries to give you like an overall idea of what his sort of mythos was based upon and the sort of ideas he was going for. And I mean, the dreamland stuff is kind of a really deep central thing to a lot of Lovecraft stuff that isn't really touched upon a lot, honestly. Like it's not something that's explored a lot.
It's clear that Lovecraft, just from the bit of reading I've done, it's clear that Lovecraft had phobias as a child. And had these like very the night gaunts or something that he actually dreamed about as a child and described in the way that Heyerdahl as Lovecraft describes them in the film. It's fairly clear that like basically what he does later, at least sort of my feeling, is that what he does kind of later in life is he starts to, as he matures as an adult, as he matures as sort of a thinker and as someone who's kind of responding to the world, he sort of personifies his fears about modernity through these things that he's always been scared of. And so, this fear of sort of the unknown becomes this tentacle monster, because he's, he dreamed about tentacles and was like terrified of like the squishy ickiness of it. And then like starts to associate those things together, and that's sort of central to Lovecraft's appeal is that he's able to kind of connect these sort of ideas together.
Right.
I kind of get it on that level that there is a dreamlike quality to this. I mean, it's ultimately, what Lovecraft is aiming for is this sort of beyond rationality, that we should be, that there are things inside us that are, sort of, at the not necessarily inside us, but things from outside that we're able to experience only in our kind of dreamlike state, which are nonetheless present and are out to come and eat us if we pay them attention, basically.
Yeah, because Randolph Carter is essentially, in his dreams, he's transported back to his uncle's life in this film, where he sees him associating with Harley Warren and the weird experiments he was doing and shit like that, and that touches upon like another story of Lovecraft's as well. So this film basically references a lot of Lovecraft stuff. It definitely is for Lovecraft geeks, but at the same time, it does do, I think, a really good job of kind of exploring what Lovecraft as an author actually like cared about and wanted to write about, and what his sort of central premises were for a lot of his stuff. And
I totally. I mean, it feels, even though I don't know the kind of background, and even though I got lost, obviously I've completely lost the plot. It strikes me as something that's there's a bit of a kind of a Lovecraft fan fiction element to it, where we're kind of writing in that style. We're kind of talking about the same kinds of ideas and trying to explore Lovecraft's legacy to a certain degree of who is he to us today. And I think that's valuable. I feel like, again, I think the production value kind of let me down just a little bit, or just distracted me a little bit.
I mean, it's 90s TV movie.
Although some of the dream stuff is actually really effective. I mean, I guess you mentioned Tales from the Crypt earlier. I mean, there's a bit where, 90s dude, has a dream and he gets dragged under a bed. And that's a pretty effective little sequence,
And I really like the stuff where he talks to Henry Armitage, the old professor guy, where he brings the book to him and talks to him, and he basically gives him the rundown of like, this is a Necronomicon. It's a really bad book. By the way, stay away from Harley Warren because he's a very dangerous person. And it's like, so Henry Armitage actually knows that, some of the stuff you're dreaming is probably actually happening. It's like actually real. And Henry Armitage, by the way, is like an H.P. Lovecraft character from the Dunwich Horror, who's one of the central H.P. Lovecraft heroes. Like, he's one of the occult detectives almost that he wrote about, who's mentioned in several of his stuff. Really good stuff. It definitely is for fans of Lovecraft, but at the same time, I find like it's kind of a film that's very inclusive. Like, you're new to Lovecraft, here's what you can kind of expect. Also, I just want to mention there's a scene where Randolph Carter, by the way, the Randolph Carter in this is not the Randolph Carter of H.P. Lovecraft's writings, because he's actually the main central hero of a lot of H.P. Lovecraft stuff. So he doesn't meet the same fate that the Randolph Carter does in this film. But there's a scene where he's walking through that tunnel and he sees this weird, like at the other end of the tunnel, he sees this weird, like other dimension appearing at the end of it. And my immediate thought is Gozer the Gozerian's dimension that Sigourney Weaver sees in her fridge. It's pretty much the same shit.
Pretty much. I get that.
I really like this one. Again, I'm biased, of course, because I am a Lovecraft fan, but I would recommend this to people who are not necessarily so familiar with Lovecraft. Like, this will give you maybe kind of an idea of what Lovecraft was going for in his stories. And again, Christopher Heiderall's fucking performance is fucking immaculate and awesome.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, if nothing else, it's worth viewing just for that, just to kind of get that performance,
right?
Because that's a phenomenal performance, and just getting a sense of who Lovecraft was, sort of as a thinker, which I think the film gets across. Even if as me, like, that stuff was so compelling that I sort of started Googling and reading a bit while it was sort of playing, and just sort of distracted me from the film itself a little bit. But I will say this And kind of doing these couple episodes with you have definitely made me want to start reading some Lovecraft, which I wasn't really expecting to kind of come out of it with that. I was kind of expecting to go, yeah, okay, I'm done.
Nice.
And really, I am kind of sitting there. Okay, I really need to sort of get my own personal handle on some of Lovecraft's writing, and
That's cool.
Particularly some of the stuff he has to say in this film. Some of the sort of dialogue that we know comes from his letters.
I'm
really
glad to hear.
gives me it's compelling. It's interesting. It kind of makes me want to kind of draw myself into Lovecraft himself a little bit more. And I think the film just didn't live up to that in terms of, I got more interested in Lovecraft and less interested in the version of that was being put on screen.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I'm actually glad to hear that. I mean, Lovecraft definitely comes with baggage. He's definitely, but I mean,
he's racist as fuck.
Yeah,
he's a proto-fascist. Like, let's not make any bones about that. There's a ton of shit even in what we've seen that like this guy was not a big fan of democracy and people that were not like him. That's who Lovecraft is.
Yeah, but at the same time, he was also an atheist, and he had some very interesting ideas on existence and death and things like that that are very much worthwhile probing into. So
well, and saying is a lot of people in that time period were I'm not that wasn't me trying to he wasn't literally Hitler, No. Exploring the ideas
and also, to be fair, the ideals of fascism that he was interested in were not necessarily Hitler's ideas.
No. He's a little bit more of a Spinglerian than a
Yeah. But I think both of these short films are interesting to check out because they're short, so you're not going to waste a lot of time on them, and I think both of them are pretty good insights into Lovecraft, and they're good like little supplements if you've been following along and have been interested in checking out Lovecraft stuff. So that's kind of where I sit on it.
Yeah, I agree, definitely.
And I'm really happy that you were able to join me for these ones, Daniel.
I'm happy to be here. I'm always I'll show up for anything. Sometimes I watch things with half an eye. I really just thought you and Paul were going to geek out over this, so I wasn't going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, but Paul never showed up.
And I kind of, I went through the other two. I kind of did the glance through, so I wouldn't be completely ignorant and have to step out. But I really thought Paul was going to be here, and then I could just listen to you guys geek out about it. But apparently, he can't show up for his own podcast, so
Yeah, but I mean, you brought it though, so
that's how we go.
That's what happens. So next episode, I'm not going to say necessarily next week because my schedule is still fucking disastrous. So it might not happen.
People, we're adults. We have things going on in our lives.
Yeah, I'm not that adult, but I still have a busy schedule. But next time, we're going to pay a little bit of a tribute to Toby Hooper, who passed away recently, and we're going to be looking at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And by the way, chainsaw is two separate words. I don't give a fuck what anyone says. The mistake on the fucking initial posters that makes chainsaw two different words, that's the title of the goddamn film. And if you disagree, you're an asshole. Just saying.
I didn't even know that was a debate, but I'm happy to learn that.
It's a debate with me.
There's an official TMBDOS position on the title of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That's right. It's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and we're going to be talking about it next episode. We had a lot of fun doing these Lovecraft episodes. I'm glad I was able to introduce Daniel to some Lovecraft stuff and pique his interest to check out some more stuff. So my job is done, honestly.
I mean, any Lovecraft that has Barbara Crampton restrained to a table is definitely on my to-do list.
Oh my god. If Lovecraft talked about Barbara Crampton's bush in his stories, they would be so much better. But still, at least
he died a little bit. He died a little bit early for that, I think.
Yeah, I guess.
One of the problems.
But Daniel, tell people where they can find you on the interweb and.
I do a lot of stuff sporadically. Check out the Wrong with Authority podcast.
Yes.
On that, there'll be a link to the most recent one I did about Romero. And just come follow me on Twitter. I'm at Daniel Lee Harper. Anything that I do goes up there. Yeah, that's probably the two best things to do right now for this episode.
Awesome. TMBDOS.podbean.com. That is where you find us. That is where you find our iTunes or /Apple podcast, however you want to fucking say it, link. You can find our YouTube link there, and you can find our Facebook link there. And our Facebook link will take you right to our Facebook group. They Must Be Destroyed on Sight on Facebook. Join the fucking group and interact with us, because that's what we want. We want people to leave us comments, questions, suggestions for movies to review, criticisms. You don't like us? You don't like what we're doing? Let us know. I mean, for the most part, we're probably going to just mock you, because
We're
you're
just
probably
gonna keep
wrong.
we've been doing this long enough. You know what else are we gonna do? We got our 15 listeners a week. Who cares? We hit the big time, baby.
We are big time, yeah. But no, honestly, if people have suggestions for what they want to see us do, we're definitely open to it. I mean, we're kind of considering, changing things up here and there, not necessarily always covering movies so much as covering topics and things like that. So, I mean, if you guys want to suggest that shit, please do, because we're really open to that. It would be something fun to engage in. And we really do want your comments and questions and stuff. We really do want to talk to you guys and engage with you guys. I know we have a lot of listeners. I mean, for us, we have a lot of listeners. I mean, we're getting like upwards of 50 to 80 or so downloads an episode over the span of, like a month and a half or so for each episode. So I know people are listening, and we want to hear what you guys have to say about our fucking podcast, even if you're just fucking sucking our dicks. We'll take that too, motherfucker. We'd love it.
And if you're Barbara Crampton, we will definitely take that.
Oh, yeah, Barbara Crampton. Our dicks are both here, waiting. Oh, I'm so sorry, Barbara. that is so terrible. But
that's Miss Crampton if you're nasty, but
Yeah, Miss Crampton, so terrible. I'm sorry. We love you though. But yeah, guys, please, really, seriously, get in contact with us. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
How arrogant of us, creatures of the moment, whose very species is but an experiment in Deus Naturae, to arrogate to ourselves an immortal future and considerable status. How do we know that that form of atomic and molecular motion called life is the highest of all forms? Perhaps the dominant creature, the most rational and godlike of all beings, is an invisible gas. Personally, I should not care for immortality in the least. There is nothing better than oblivion, since in oblivion there is no wish unfulfilled. We had it before we were born, yet did not complain. Shall we then whine because we know it will return? The mammals, of which man is part, are simply a psychochemical phenomenon, a component of carbon animated by a form of electric energy. When this energy disappears and the body disintegrates, everything is finished.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For past episodes and links to our iTunes, YouTube, and Facebook group, please visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can also find links to other podcasts and websites of similar interest. If you subscribe to us on iTunes, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and a review. Please join our Facebook group, as it's the single best place to get in contact with the hosts and to know what's coming up on the podcast. Thank you. Drive through.